In 2025, the entire AI landscape was completely redrawn, and right at the center of that earthquake was one company, Anthropic. So today, we're going to dive into a pretty stunning due diligence report from BGVC that shows exactly how they managed to reshape an entire industry in just 1 year.
So let's just start with the number that made everyone's jaw hit the floor. $183 billion. That was the valuation Anthropic hit in its Series F funding round at the end of 2025. A number like that, well, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It needs a serious explanation.
And here's how they did it. This is the engine behind that massive valuation. In a single year, Anthropic grew its annual recurring revenue, that's ARR, by almost 900%. Now, this wasn't just growth. It was more like a financial rocket ship, and it signaled that the whole market was changing under our feet.
What we're really talking about here is the crowning of a new king. All the numbers, all the data, it all points to one thing. Anthropic became the top dog in enterprise AI. So, let's break down how they pulled it off.
Okay, so here's the core argument of this whole analysis, and it's a big one. Anthropic isn't just some clever research lab anymore. No, they've built the only real, effective alternative to the massive Microsoft and OpenAI partnership. Now, we're going to get into the evidence for that, starting with the tech that made it all possible.
That whole 900% growth story really comes down to one single revolutionary idea. We're not just talking about a slightly better AI model here. We're talking about a whole new way of thinking about AI. This is the story of the digital employee.
The big breakthrough was this capability they called computer use, and it came with their Claude 4.5 model. All of a sudden, the AI wasn't just chatting with you. It could literally see your screen, move your mouse, and type on your keyboard. It was using software just like any human employee would.
And this comparison chart just lays it out perfectly. The past was all about the chatbot, right? It was a passive assistant. You asked it a question, it gave you an answer. But the future is this digital employee. It's an active agent. It doesn't just answer questions, it actually completes tasks for you right inside your apps. It's the difference between asking for directions and just having someone drive you there.
And Anthropic was really smart about how they deployed this. They didn't just have one model, they had a whole family. Opus 4.5 was the superbrain for the really tough, complex jobs. Haiku 4.5 was the fast, cheap option, meant to fight off the open source guys. But the real superstar was Sonnet 4.5. That was the workhorse that put these digital employees into businesses all over the world.
So, we've seen the groundbreaking tech. Now let's connect the dots and see how that turned into that absolutely historic 900% growth. Let's look at the numbers.
And there it is, the perfect J-curve. I mean, look at this. Anthropic started 2025 with $1 billion in ARR, which, by the way, is already incredible. By March, they're at $1.4 billion. But then Claude 4.5 gets rolled out, and the curve just goes vertical. More than $5 billion by August, and an estimated $9 billion to end the year. That kind of speed it's almost unheard of.
And to put that 800% year-over-year growth into perspective, just look at the competition. OpenAI, a phenomenal company, grew at 240%. Databricks, a data giant, at 55%. Anthropic was just playing a completely different game in 2025. Now, what's so important here is the kind of revenue this is. This isn't money from fickle consumer subscriptions that people can just cancel. Nope. 80% of Anthropic's money came from big, sticky business-to-business contracts. That means customers stick around for a long time, which builds this incredibly strong, fortress-like financial foundation.
So yeah, this wasn't just luck. Anthropic was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. They were executing a master plan, building these deep structural defenses for their new kingdom. Let's look at the blueprint.
This table just perfectly captures their genius move. You see, while OpenAI went all in with Microsoft Azure and Nvidia chips, Anthropic did the exact opposite. They built a multi-cloud system with both AWS and Google. They deliberately set themselves up to be the only other choice for big companies that didn't want to be locked into the Microsoft ecosystem.
And this dual cloud strategy was a total game changer. For one, it let them use custom, cheaper chips from both Amazon and Google, which meant they could escape that crazy Nvidia tax on computing power. But even better, they basically turned the giant sales teams at both AWS and Google into their own personal sales force. Just a brilliant, brilliant move.
But there's this one kind of strange and controversial piece of the Anthropic puzzle. It's their unique corporate governance.
And for any investor, the question is simple. Is this a huge, fatal flaw, or is it secretly their most powerful weapon? It's this thing called the Long-Term Benefit Trust. It's basically a committee whose job is to make sure the AI benefits humanity, not just to make as much money as possible. The upside? It prevents all that messy corporate drama like we saw at OpenAI. And that makes big, cautious clients in government and finance feel really safe. The downside? The trust can literally veto a future IPO, which is a massive risk for investors who, want to actually cash out someday.
Okay, so let's wrap this all up. When you look at the tech, the insane growth, the smart strategy, and the very real risks, what's the final verdict on this $183 billion company?
Now this is where it gets really fascinating. Look at the valuation multiple here. This price-to-sales number, it basically tells you how much investors are willing to pay for every dollar a company makes. And what's crazy is that even with that huge $183 billion price tag, Anthropic's multiple is actually lower than both OpenAI's and Databricks. And that leads us to the report's absolutely stunning conclusion. When you remember that they're growing at 800%, that valuation suddenly doesn't look like a bubble at all. In fact, this analysis suggests that compared to everyone else, the company might actually be a bargain. Of course, no company is perfect, and the report is very clear on the big risks. First, their profit margins are kind of low, because running these massive models costs a fortune. Second, a huge $1.5 billion copyright settlement is going to make training data more expensive forever. And finally, there's still that long-term benefit trust, which has the ultimate say on whether they can ever have an IPO. But we'll end with this final thought, because it really captures the new reality that Anthropic created. In the high-stakes game of enterprise AI, it turns out that safety and control weren't problems to be solved. They were the actual keys that unlocked the biggest budgets in the world. Anthropic crowned itself king, and the only question now is, how long can they stay on top?